Think of all the weddings that you've gone to over the years. Weddings of all sorts and kinds. And the ceremony undoubtedly was beautiful and everyone oohed and ahed. And then you went to the reception. And you kind of looked around for your table. You know those numbers they have on the tables that make no sense whatever? So you're searching around for your table. And you find that it's at the farthest point from the head table. Yeah, been there. In fact, it's right by the band, the big speaker that the band has. How would you feel? What would your reaction be? Would you be slighted or perplexed or maybe hurt? Would you feel any better if your seat had been very close to the head table? Where we sit is so important to us. I suppose even in church, one might argue. It's important to us at home. Maybe we have our favorite chair. I do. Maybe we have a favorite seat at work, or it reflects who we are in the organization. And it's just the way that human nature works. Our seats say a lot about who we think we are. And we spend a great deal of time just worrying about our seats and shuffling about, arranging our seats and protecting our seats. It's hard to do at church sometimes, isn't it? Especially on Christmas Eve. And at first glance, we might think that Luke's gospel today is a story about seating arrangements. You wonder, where was Jesus sitting? Or more historically accurate, where was Jesus reclining? Because they reclined at table. Was he near the leading Pharisee? Or was he near the back door? Do you think he cared very much where he was seated? And his point, Jesus' point and Luke's point, is that in the kingdom of God, seating arrangements are not important. They don't matter. And Jesus is reminding us that in the light of eternity, our human status, who we think we are, our power, our prestige, our possessions, have no meaning whatsoever. They don't count as a drop in the bucket at all. They have no meaning. But what is important is the depth with which we have loved the Lord and one another. The great commandment, to love God and to love one another, regardless of who they are or where they sit. Both Jesus and the author of the book of Sirach from the Old Testament teach us to conduct ourselves with humility. The Latin word humus, meaning of the earth, being human, that's where we came from the earth. But being humble doesn't mean that we need to be a doormat, but rather Jesus calls us to recognize and accept that we are gifted, we are enriched and nourished by God, by all of these gifts that God has given us, and that we are to share those gifts. We're to reach out with others. It's not just me and God. We've talked about this before. You know, the cross, it's not just about our vertical relationship with God, but it's about moving from that to a relationship with all people. Jesus calls us as Christians to share our gifts. And I love this phrase that I found, not so that we can stand out and be proud, but so that others can stand up with us as we hold their hands, as we celebrate the God who has blessed us in so many different ways. Luke's story speaks of humility in terms of table etiquette, you know, that was kind of obvious from the gospel, and hospitality. something that we as Catholic Christians need to work on more and more as we welcome people into the house of the Lord. Who is welcome at the table in Luke's gospel? And it's interesting for us to reflect upon the architecture of our church, of our worship space, when we renovated it, because it speaks of both humility and hospitality. All are welcome. As we sung in our entrance hymn, all are welcome through these doors. All who enter through these doors do so as equals. Regardless of who we are or where we sit out in the world, you and I are here as equals. And we gather in pews that surround the table of the Lord, so that no one is further back than 9 rows. There's no being way back, the way it used to be. And that's very deliberate, so that we can be hospitable to one another by actually looking at one another, gazing upon one another as fellow journey people in the faith. So the architecture really does have some import for us. You know, this table has no front, it has no back. It's somewhat circular in shape, as is this semicircle, so that we just all gather, as the people gathered that day at the house of the leading Pharisee, all gathered as equals. And that's Jesus, really, his great point. And yet, in our culture, when we go out there, we're constantly reminded it's all about your power. How much power do you have? How much wealth have you accumulated? How great a reputation do you have? How comfortably does one live? And we strive to enter through the wide gate of success. Remember last week we talked about the narrow gate, often to the detriment of others. Mother Teresa was once asked, how do you measure the success of your work? And with her usual spot-on response, she said, I don't remember that the Lord ever said anything about success. He only spoke of faithfulness in love. And that's the only success that really counts. Let me just close with this story about a group of seasoned graduates, I'll call them. You know, the old-timers, as we all are. I won't say all, as I am. And they went to a class reunion, and they visited their old professor. And they complained about all the stress in their lives. So the professor went into the kitchen, and he returned with a large pot of hot chocolate and an assortment of cups. Some were very plain looking, some were expensive, some were exquisite. And he told them to help themselves to the hot chocolate. Well, you know what probably happened. Which cups did they choose? And when they all had a cup in hand, the professor said to them, notice that all the nice-looking, expensive cups were taken, leaving behind the plain ones and the cheap ones. And he said, while it's really normal, as part of human nature, to want only the best for yourselves, he said, that's the source of your problems and your stress. He said, the cup from which you are drinking adds nothing to the quality of the hot chocolate. In most cases, it's just a more expensive cup. What you really wanted was the hot chocolate, not the cup. But you consciously went for the best cups. And then you began to eye one another's cups. Now consider this, he said. Life is the hot chocolate. Your job, your money, your position in society are the cups. They're just tools that hold life together. The cup does not define who you are. It does not change the quality of your life. But sometimes, he said, you concentrate only on the cup and you fail to enjoy the hot chocolate that God has provided for us. God makes the hot chocolate. We make the cups. We choose the cups. And the happiest people don't have the best of everything. They just enjoy everything that they have. So let's live simply, love generously, and care deeply. Speak kindly to one another. Oh, how we need that these days. To speak kindly to one another and listen to one another. And it doesn't matter whether you're sitting by the band or not. And even if you are, you might even get to listen to the story of the guitar player.